I think it's going to make a lot of people have to, in a lot of ways, evolve their approach to jiu-jitsu, because I think like you and I both, as we talked about before, kind of came from smaller gyms or gyms where we didn't have access to like current black belt world champions and stuff. So, we had to do a lot of our own self-development. And I think this situation is going to force a lot of people training at big gyms to kind of develop that, which I think in the long run will be good for them. I think that one of the most common questions I get right now is people asking me about like solo drills or how to get good when they're by themselves. And like, I don't know your thoughts on that, but I'll give my perspective and I would like to hear what you kind of think. My kind of
Yeah,
thought is
yeah,
like
absolutely.
with the solo drills, as I think for people who are like really new to jiu-jitsu, I think there's some solo drills that can be useful, like, shrimps and like learning to kind of invert on your neck and things like that, and like probably some like guard retention drills. But I think for like the people that are a little bit more advanced, I don't feel like there's a ton they can really do with solo drills to improve. So kind of my advice on that topic has been more what they're really trying to solve is how do they improve when they cannot train as much, right? So like what can you be doing when you're off the mat to still improve? And my kind of thought was, well, I guess you have different situations. If you can at least get a partner like once a week to train with, even if it's just like someone who's not super advanced, but like just someone that you can like for an hour a week sit there and work on some positions with. I think the best thing you could be doing right now is watching a lot of like competition video and just like taking notes on ideas and things to test, and then kind of develop that one training partner that you trust in this time period to work with once or twice a week. But I think that, if you just do, say, two training sessions a week with that partner, or you do two training sessions a week with that partner, but you also watch like 5 hours of competition video throughout the week, I think that will make you improve like drastically more. I think that's one of the most underutilized methods of learning in jiu-jitsu is people think the only time they get better is when they're on the mat. And it's like on the mat matters, but also like analyzing video matters too. And I think if you could just get like if you put a little bit of effort into finding a training partner, like even if they're not as good as you would like, just so you can do that work and then watch a lot of videos, probably the most useful thing you can do. And then if you don't have that at all, then I really think the best thing you could do, and you're probably more of an expert in this field, is like really get into like your like strength training, your movement work, your like mobility, flexibility, and kind of like auxiliary skill sets. I feel like that's my goal right now is when I can't train, is trying to focus on my strength training and my mobility, because those are things that I think as you do a lot of jujitsu, they actually suffer because you're training so much high volume jujitsu. It's hard to
I
prioritize your strength
absolutely
gains and
agree
things,
with
right?
that.
Right. So I think strength training, mobility work, flexibility work, and watching a lot of competition video, and anyone you can get to just do some like specific training or parameter training, as I'm sure we'll get into in a little bit, is probably the best thing you can do. But I don't know if you had any thoughts.
Oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I think it's a little bit of a craze right now that people are so focused with solo drills because, this idea of like shadow wrestling or shadow grappling, essentially, this is a solo skill set, which it, I would say that trying to emulate a little bit more of a shadow grappling approach is a little bit more conducive to improving overall skill set, just because I think there's a lot more visualization involved. And if you really are, if you really put intention into the visualization, I think you can really imagine like there's somebody in front of you. And
Yeah.
as much as it sounds like a really hard skill set for certain people, I personally, I've done this a lot because, as you said, like sometimes I don't have access to high level training partners, and sometimes having to teach reaction to white belts. More so, like, for example, I'll give a reference to even Europeans of this year. I was based in Cologne for the 2 weeks prior to the European Championship. So usually the 2 weeks out of competition, if I'm at Unity, it's very, very, everybody has. Whereas now I'm in the middle of Cologne at this gym where mainly all the students are white and blue belts, and I'm supposed to be supposed to be like kind of reaching my peak and tapering off a little bit, but having to roll with some white belts, I'm like, oh, okay, you don't put the leg here, like I can't do the correct reaction here, da 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 da. And of course, like essentially there's not necessarily, I don't like to say that, oh, that's wrong as in a reaction. I like to say that's less optimal and more optimal reactions. Like, oh, this reaction is more optimal and will get you into a situation where you have better alignment or better body positioning. And of course, it's because I was in the competitive mindset. I didn't really want to have to teach the reaction every 2 seconds. So I kind of resulted to doing a lot more shadow grappling during that time, where I would kind of just visualize my opponent. I'm visualizing the correct reactions. I'm really trying to get 100 here to kind of slack off and not have correct body positioning just because there wasn't a body there. I'd really imagine like the height of the leg in relationship to the floor, so on and so forth. So I think rather solo movement with added visualization can be very, very useful. I think, as you said, for certain, right.
Yeah,
I think for beginners, as you said, sorry, I keep interrupting you. Go ahead.
I think it's a delay. I think it's like a 3-second delay. That's probably why. Yeah, I think you bringing that up really reminds me. Like, I remember when I was like a blue belt or something, and I was like living with my parents back when I was like 17 or 18, and I remember doing that a lot at my house when I was alone, where I would just like kind of simulate matches in my head. And I think that's when I was thinking about like solo drills, I would really forgot about like that mode of kind of moving. And I think a couple of like interesting thoughts about that is that I think it will be, one thing is like it will be how accurately you can solo roll or just like shadow roll will kind of be defined by your level of understanding, right? So like if you're playing collar sleeve,
absolutely,
in your head, you're visualizing what that position is to be like, right? But if you don't have any reference point on what collar sleeve is, then it's hard to do that visualization. So you're kind of more developing within the positions that you know. But one thing that I do think is interesting about it, just as you were talking, I was thinking about this, is it does seem like just doing that, if you really try to purely visualize it, it might actually make you, I think, not in the same way as getting punished when you're rolling, where if you do the wrong thing, the guy passes you. But if you try to like understand where the bounds of what you can actually visualize kind of disappears, that might actually act as a similar way of giving you that feedback of where you don't know. So like if you're in collar sleeve, you're like, okay, I'm here, he kills my leg. And then you have to think, well, what should I do here actually? And I think that's something I didn't consider, but I do think that that's a very good format. So that's a really cool idea.
I do have a lot of thoughts on that too, because the nature of rolling by yourself is that time is literally infinite and there are no repercussions for you fucking up. So in that way, you can kind of play with the level of stress in the environment, you know? Like something I like to talk about a lot in rolling is stress. Even the way that I grab your arm or I grab your wrist, I can convey a lot just from the touch alone, right? If I just gently grab your wrist, I don't give you a high stress response in your body. So I'm still conveying to you non-verbally that, okay, you're safe. But if I really grab it in the most pojado way possible, like really like grab you, like I want to break your wrist, you know, all of a sudden you're like, wow, this bitch is crazy. Kind of have like this flight or fight response, you know? So in that way, you're going to be using a lot more defensive structures and stuff. And hence, this is actually something that I like to utilize a lot in my style of play. Like I like to make other people feel safe, because I think at the end of the day that fighting is the art of deception, you know? The more deceiving you can be in the fight, then the more successful you'll be. If you just leave everything super open in terms of your structure, or like if your feints aren't really well placed, it's too easy for the other person to be able to read your movement. I think when you're in a solo environment, because again, that time is infinite, you can really play with the idea like, okay, I'm doing the collar and sleeve here. Usually the person would react and maybe pummel the hand inside, but then you can really think about, oh, okay, like if they do that, I can do this, or I can do this. Or what if their timing is really good here? Maybe I'll have to frame over here and abandon the collar and sleeve da 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 da. Or maybe I didn't have enough time to put in the shadow lasso. What happens here? I think you're able to really build on the problem solving process if you allow yourself to. But I think this is a lot to do with the fact that a lot of people struggle to have this self-inquiry process,
Yeah.
because they haven't been taught how to have that process. They don't know how to ask these questions. They ask you questions like, how do I pass that? But it's like rather, oh, if my structure's here, like, even if I have the best structure in this, it's a great static structure. But as soon as a person takes another move, when it becomes a more dynamic situation, like how am I now able to react to that? Or I could have great structure in this moment, but my timing is absolutely shit for the next move. Therefore, now I am no longer in good structure. So I think just being able to build on this inquiry process I think
I
this is
think
a great time for all
Lucas
that.
Galvacera, when I had him here staying here, I don't know if you know who he is. He's a guy from Argentina, really really good guard. He fought Isaac Doderlin at like Abu Dhabi last year. I think it went to a decision, but both me and Isaac rolled with him a lot. And he's got this really 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 good guard, and he's also very like intelligent and articulate about the process of learning jiu-jitsu in general. And he was saying that kind of similar to what you were talking about with the reflection process of people, like the off the mat reflection of jiu-jitsu and thinking about it and the visualization. He was saying he can get a lot out of understanding where a student's at by just asking them after a match at a tournament, like what happened, how did it go? And like some people, like they'll explain the match as like, oh, he was like, really aggressive and like he pressured and then like I pushed and then he passed. And like you can tell that like by that person's like the way they're talking, it's like they don't understand jiu-jitsu and they're not reflective on what even was happening, right? Whereas you could ask someone else, like, man, I was trying to get my lasso, but I couldn't get his sleeve, so then I had to grab the ankle. And then when I grabbed the ankle, like I didn't know what to do. And then he kind of like got a knee cut, and then it went here. And it's like that reflective process is so important. And I think, yeah, to your point with the shadow grappling, I
It's
think.
too black and white. You're absolutely
Yeah.
right. Like I think a lot of people, the reflection process is like, what was the end result? Like, shit, I got passed. Rather like, I can tell you, like, even in the classroom environment, let's say like I'm losing all my roles, but I don't necessarily after like the session, I don't go like, oh shit, like I got passed every round. My reflection process is more of okay, the timing of me trying to get my foot back in with the leg pommel was a little bit late there. My structure was good prior to that, but because I was a little bit lazy with my guard retention here, I got passed. And once I was there, I was able to keep good structure. They weren't able to submit me, but because of that previous mistake, rather, and the lapse in timing, that caused me a lot of further issues and rather a delay for me to recover guard, so
Yeah,
on
I
and
think
so forth.
that kind of goes
Sorry,
with
like
go ahead. You there?
yeah, I'm
Oh,
here.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the lag time just it makes it so difficult when one of us switches talking because it's like I think it's like a 5 second delay, so it makes it so
Yeah,
hard to
no,
like to
don't worry
pace the
about it.
timing. Okay. Yeah, I was gonna say I think an interesting thing to note is I think I had a guy visiting here, Ying Hao. He's in where is he? I think he's in Copenhagen.
Oh yeah, I know
Uh,
him too.
oh yeah, really cool guy. And we were training, and I was talking to him a bit about like trying to evolve your game and some like more like talking about reflection and stuff. And he was saying that when he's in the match, it's hard for him to to figure out how to evolve. And it kind of brought up this conversation that I think highlighted a really good point, which was that the evolution in your game usually comes not during the roll. Usually it's in the reflection after, right? So I would say normally, like what should happen is you roll in like a normal session. So you roll for like an hour with people, and then all these patterns and like responses are going to happen. And then afterwards, like the reflection, like thinking about it, shadow grappling, watching competition video, having conversation about positions. That's kind of the things that's like the those are the tools that you have to kind of change the structure of the way your brain sees these positions and comes up with proposed solutions to all of your individual problems. And then the next time you roll, all that work that you did outside will initiate the evolution into your next roll, right? Where a lot of people think you could roll every single day, like for 2 hours and have no reflection, and you will still progress as well, but like you're not maximizing it. And I think you're very
slower rate.
Yeah, I think you're very similar to me, which is I'm always concerned about this. Like there's a maximum amount of physical output that you can do before you're getting diminishing returns, right? That's why like someone who wants to get strong at the bench press, they don't do bench press every day, all day, every day. They maybe do it twice a week or something, right? Because you're getting diminishing returns. So to me, it's like, I think this kind of ties in with the Corona time period and quarantine training, is that you're probably not going to be able to get the same volume of jujitsu that you could do before. So maybe if you can get 1 session a week or 2 sessions a week, and you have to put a lot of effort into finding that partner that you can train with at your house and solve those kind of logistical issues with how you can do that, you may get 1 or 2 training sessions a week, but then it's even more important that you really maximize these other tools that you have, be it watching competition video, having conversations about positions, shadow grappling, and kind of implementing these things. So I think that's kind of maybe one of the changes in this time period that's important, is the emphasis is getting put more on the reflection and analyzation aspect as opposed to just the rolling aspect.
I think going back to the point of solo drills, why it may be useful for even certain advanced practitioners is there's a certain level of muscle memory involved with all of these movements that we do, right? And because they are so deeply ingrained in mainly the physical output, there's not as much of this reflection process. I think there's always this fear in the back of our minds that, oh my God, I'm going to forget what jiu-jitsu is in like 2-3 weeks, and you start developing less optimal habits, whether it's like, oh, your foot or your knee crosses your center line when you're doing guard retention or trying to do like a wall spin and stuff. So I think at that point, like just to maintain certain fundamental habits, it is a great tool. But again, to your point of for advanced practitioners, like there are many different tools that they can utilize that can definitely improve their jiu-jitsu. As we said, like improving just the fundamental movement skills, like motor control, strength training, mobility, really thinking about like what are our strongest structures in the guard position or in the passing, the visualization.
I think there's so many things. Another cool idea I was just thinking about with the shadow grappling, kind of combined with the like watching competition video, is like you might be able to actually just watch competition video and kind of try to simulate a match. So just imagine that you're watching like a competitor that you really like. You can watch the match and see, okay, at the beginning of the match, like the person you're studying is playing guard, they're on their back. The person on top initiates a knee cut, and then they lasso, and then they grab the sleeve with their right hand. You could actually try to like kind of pause play that match and mirror that match yourself. Like this is the scenario that you have no partner at all, right? So you're just drawing straws here, but you could actually mirror that match yourself and try to do
that's
that
totally
and
true.
see how that could actually help you understand why they're doing what they're doing, and like kind of imagine, like visualize and imagine, okay, the person's here, they have the lapel, they're knee cutting. Here he was able to throw his leg over. Okay, I'll do that. And like kind of that kind of interactive process, I do think there's a lot to gain out of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know this is in no way a comparison, but like back in the day, like in the Hong Kong martial art movie scene, like with Bruce stuff, like everybody kind of reenacts the moves that Bruce was doing and stuff. Like I remember because I was studying Chinese martial arts, right? I was like studying Chinese Kung Fu and Shaolin and stuff. So I would reenact Bruce's moves because I had just watched the tape so many times, regardless, it wasn't really a match, it's more of a movie and there's a certain choreography behind it. It's fairly easy to understand the sequence of moves. But yeah, I totally have been guilty of doing this, the jiu-jitsu matches as well, you know, like I will be watching the tape, I kind of see a sequence or move, like, oh, that's really interesting. I play that position too. Like, let's see what he ends up doing. I'm kind of emulating it in real time as much as I'm like trying to visualize, oh, okay, like they did that reaction. Like, maybe like when I'm playing, I prefer to do this reaction usually. That's why it causes my partner to do this instead of what's happening in the video. So again, it seems like a nice layer onto the reflection process.
Yeah, that's really cool. We talked a bit last time about parameter training as well. I thought that was like a really good couple thoughts if you do have a partner that you can train with. And we were discussing, because of the fact that, when you're training in a gym, you have, maybe 30, 40 different training partners. So you may have partners that will cover most things that you'll have to deal with. Like the person might do double underhook passing, another person might do more Toriandos, another person might play guard a lot. So this idea of like when you have one partner, like not just rolling, but like, I usually call it specific sparring, and then you were kind of using the term parameters. But I guess
Right.
Traditionally when you hear the word specific sparring, people more think of just a position, right? So it'd be like, okay, we're going to start in closed guard. If you open the closed guard, then we start over, we go back. If I sweep or submit, we stop, we go back. And that's kind of specific sparring.
Yeah.
But you can carry that over to be like specific to not necessarily just the position, but also in how you roll and other things. And that's, I guess, where we were referring to it more as parameter. But we were talking about like such things as like, your heart rate. Like you could roll and fix your heart rate such that you're like, okay, I'm going to try to never go above 130 beats per minute. And then you'll see how that will reflect and change the way you're rolling technically, because you may be playing a position and then you realize that trying to sustain that position in the way that you are doing it is unsustainable at keeping your heart rate below 130. So it'll actually make you change your technique, and that can cause a lot of evolution. I think we even made a list, I think, of maybe some of the different parameters that are fun to control. And then also, I think this started a lot of ideas about creativity by creating a fixed variable.
Absolutely. And to add on to the parameters too, so I took a movement class with one of my friends from Vienna yesterday, and they talked a lot about even structural inhibition. Like if someone is repeatedly doing a certain move, we can kind of see like, oh, that is inhibition in the structure. If they keep doing that, like how else can I move around the structure? I think it can also force the problem solving rather than like in normal roles. If someone encounters a problem, there's a tendency to keep going forth with that problem with the same solution, I think in this specific scenario where we can also drop the ego a little bit more, as we talked about last time too, like setting parameters and rather this specific training scenario, it becomes a lot easier to allow ourselves to make mistakes, which I think is a lot more conducive to the learning process. Again, another topic that we were talking about a lot, like how are we able to maximize the potential of our learning in the classroom environment. I think something that's quite interesting that I've noticed from running in terms of the heart rate and the BPM is that they have different heart rate zones, right? From like zone 1 to zone 5, I believe. So let's say like you never want your heart rate to go above zone 3, so on and so forth. It becomes a little bit more easy to track certain variables. And as you said, okay, if we can't go above zone 3, how else can I move around the structure? Or like, how else can I problem solve? Maybe I'm used to problem solving in this way, but that makes me go into zone 4 and it isn't as efficient for me to go that pathway because I know it requires a lot more energy expenditure. What else can I do here now instead? I think, as you said, it kind of gives us a lot more room to play and explore, since now we're no longer limited in the way that only limited because as we also mentioned last time, when there are no restraints or controlled variables, almost having too much freedom to improvise will force us into the same patterns over and over, and we don't actually get to build or develop on new things. Once we place a certain controlled variable or restraint into the game, suddenly you feel a lot more freedom to play within a smaller space.
Yeah, I think it's
which almost feels like a metaphor for the quarantine, you know. No, it's absolutely fine. Don't worry.
I think that it's interesting because, like, in math, that's even a thing, right? It's like if you have a single equation and 3 variables, it's unsolvable, right? Like you have to have like one variable, right? You can't have so many variables at once because then it's too much to analyze. It's not possible. So you have to like fixate on one. So it's another interesting thought is talking about like, fixing, like, the parameter around like your cardio makes you have to change other things. The other interesting thing is the ego. You could view that as like one of the fixed parameters, right? Like a lot of people, and we're all guilty of this. Like whenever we roll, we want to win. Like most all of us want to try to win our match, right? And when you're in the setting of a normal class, it's just way easier in a regular role to kind of get into that mindset where you're trying to win so hard because you're protecting your ego from not losing. And we can all say that we don't do that, but I promise you, if you're in the gym and you like pass Cabrinha's guard or something, he's going to be very upset. He's going to come back hard. But when you do specific training like this and you kind of make the mode where you're trying to open up more, you'll try things you're less good at because you don't care about losing. Where like if I'm used to right leg leading when I pass the guard, if I go into a regular match and my ego is like, okay, I got to win. I got to treat this like a tournament. I got to win. I know if I left leg lead that I'm probably going to do worse than if I right leg lead, right? So then I probably won't do that, right? Or if I know my triangle choke finish isn't good and I see an opening for it, I probably won't go for it because I know if I miss it, I'm going to get my guard passed. So then you don't take those risks to try to evolve, right? And of course, you can try to master your ego and be okay with losing, but that tends to be, for most people, a way harder thing. We can all talk about it, but if there's that person in the gym that you hate to lose to, like a lot of people struggle to get over that. So it's way easier to just change the format of training to be like, okay, we're going to do specific training. I'm going to start with my left leg lead because I'm not good with it. And I'm going to try to pass from here. And if you start off that way and just like off the bat, like you lose the first 2 or 3 rounds and you kind of let go of that ego and you're like, I'm just trying to learn, you can get into this place with your partner where they're engaged in the process of helping you. So they're like, oh man, if you had done this here, I think it would have given me a harder time. And like, it's like you two together trying to solve the position as opposed to you trying to beat each other. I think you referred to that as like competitive play versus collaborative play.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a form of movement research, like when we are joined in this environment where 2 of us can actually mutually do research and the end result, it really doesn't matter. Like all of this really doesn't matter. Whether you win or lose, nothing actually changes. You do get that ego boost, but I think I would consider a problem in the classroom most of the time is that, the teachers are essentially leaders in the room, whether or not, like, for example, I use the term leader, but it doesn't mean necessarily superior. It's just a person leading and suggesting the parameters of the session and stuff, and if there's more conversation on how we should be conducting ourselves or more focus on specific training that we're talking about, I think it makes it a lot easier for people to actually, again, stimulate their minds, because a lot of people come into this environment and they're like just trying to come in for stress relief, or they're just coming in to beat people up or win, right? But then now you add another layer of conversation where like, okay, we're going to see like what are the possibilities from the colon sleep position, or I'm only going to maintain guard using the colon sleeve and you're going to try and pass, like what are different maintenance strategies you can use. So it really becomes a form of research, and I'm gaining and gathering more data with every exchange. I'm becoming smarter in every single exchange here. That's fucking awesome. And it really adds to the learning process, the mastery. And I mean, not everyone needs to desire mastery per se. Of course, I would say this is our preference as well, you know. But I think if more people talked about it, then I think a lot more people would find it appealing, you know,
Yeah, I feel
rather
like
than
there's
just say, oh,
this,
win or lose,
there's
no
almost
matter
this
what.
like dogmatic attitude in the jiu-jitsu community often about smart training and being like this pohada every day kind of attitude that people have, which is, of course, there's times where you need to go very hard and prep for a tournament to get in that competitive mode. But at the same time, like if you talk a lot about like intelligent training models, there is a lot of people out there that almost like condescendingly talk down on it like it's a weakness, which is really interesting to me because the whole premise of jiu-jitsu traditionally was to beat a bigger, stronger person using your brain and smart training habits. That's why Hoist Gracie was able to beat Dan Severn, is because Dan Severn didn't know what a triangle choke was. But eventually, you know, like the other fighters learned what a triangle choke was, and then it was hard. So then you had to evolve and create new things. And it is interesting to me now that a lot of the people that become coveted in modern jiu-jitsu, without naming names, there's a lot of performance enhancers, a lot of like steroided out people who are huge and strong. It's like fight hard. And like when you try to get into this kind of like technical conversations about development, efficient energy use, and things like that, they like, you know, they're not only are they disinterested, but they're almost like antagonized by it, which I find interesting.
It's an ego thing again, isn't it, though? You know, because when you bring up an idea of smarter training, I think people often perceive it as like, oh, you think you're superior or you think you're better, and they make an ego conversation once more, you know, rather than like, no, it's like this is another layer of the problem solving approach, you know, like not necessarily that it's a problem, but you're trying to optimize what is available, you know, you're still just trying to get better, of course, but as you said, like the use of performance enhancers and stuff, like it's a way of enhancing certain physical attributes, you know. How I see like jujitsu players in a competition, for example, it's a little bit like in a video game. You know, you have different stats. You have your attack, your defense, special attack, agility, whatever. And you know, the performance enhancers can only really boost your ability for certain stats only. It's not going to really enhance your understanding of jiu-jitsu, body positioning. It's not going to make your technique better, but it will allow you to do certain things more, you know. But then that really doesn't necessarily make your jiu-jitsu better. That's just making you better in terms of human performance, you know.
Yeah, I think the main things like the steroids would help with is obviously like strength in the match,
The recovery and stuff.
endurance, and
Yeah.
I think one of the big ones is training volume, right? Because they can get so much more training time on the mat, which I think would also drive home the point more of what we were talking about, the reflection time, because basically if you want to overcome someone who's on performance enhancers or just is more naturally strong and recovers better than you or younger than you, then you know if the most your body can physically handle is like 3 sessions a week, if that's the most you can physically handle, right, and or say 5 sessions a week, but they can handle 10 sessions a week and strength training on top of that, then the only way for you to overcome that is through ramping up your reflection efficiency. Like if you call your rolling time is like where you actually develop, and the reflection is kind of like a multiplier.
Hey,
So like if
sorry, you cut off
roll,
for you cut off for like 10 seconds, John.
oh man,
Sorry, can you just
cool.
repeat
No, it's okay.
what you said?
Where was I at when I cut off? You know?
Performance enhancers. Uh,
Yeah. So I'll
what
just start talking about
else?
performance enhancers. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Am I there now though?
Yeah, you absolutely.
Okay,
Yes.
cool.
Sorry, I just said that
No,
there
it's
was a
okay.
problem
Yeah,
with
so
that
I
one.
was saying that with the performance enhancers, the main thing is that the main thing that the performance enhancers will help with are like your strength, probably your endurance in the match. But I think one of the big ones is training volume, right? So if
Yeah,
you can get
yeah,
three, if the most your body can handle is 3 training sessions a week, but they can handle 5 or even 10 at a very high intensity and strength train, then I think that drives home the point that we made before even more of the reflection and the creativity part as even more important. Because I view like the training time is when you're actually changing your body's pattern recognition, but the reflection and the creative thinking part and all that other stuff is kind of what I would call like a multiplier. So if you do 3 sessions a week, you're going to improve, X amount. But if you do 3 sessions a week and a lot of video analyzation and a lot of reflection and like shadow grappling and conversations, you can speed up. You're going to magnify like 5x whatever your normal improvement rate would be, right? I mean, I think a simple, kind of thought experiment to drive this point home is just the idea of like a lot of jiu-jitsu, it's about finding the right patterns, right? You can play a position for 5 years and be playing it wrong, and then you could train with someone else, who's really good at that position. They can show you in one like minute, oh yeah, just put your foot here instead of here, and it just makes the position that much more effective. So it is a game of knowledge. So it's possible that you put a ton of effort into a position and you come out with a suboptimal method of playing that position, but someone else who's already done all that work could save you time. So you just have to imagine that all of the physical labor you're doing is just kind of, I almost view it as like a necessary damage on the body to develop the correct patterns to move efficiently. Because like to me, like strength and mobility are kind of growing your body. Jiu-jitsu can be somewhat destructive, right? So I try to do
absolutely, yeah.
as much jujitsu as I can while not destroying my body, and then trying to, as intelligently as possible, upgrade my pattern recognition through conversations, video analyzation, discussing with other high-level competitors on positions, shadow grappling, thought experiments, and etc.
Absolutely, like you said, we have to think about jiu-jitsu a little bit as the damage part, and then everything else is damage control.
Yeah.
And to give the video game parallel again, it's like you're losing hit points and like your life meter is going to deplete. So you have to kind of find that balance, I think through having more of these conversations or like thought experiments, playing with different parameters and stuff, it's almost a very creative, but also at the same time academic, in the way that it's very similar to how when you go into an academic institute and you're doing, whether it's a dissertation or homework or something, you can't just do math really hard.
Yeah,
If we have
absolutely.
to give the parallel almost of like, you keep getting the same shit wrong over and over and over and over. It doesn't really seem like efficient use of time. I can try and do it as fast as possible every time, but I'd still get it
Yeah,
wrong,
and steroids
Or
don't
like,
help.
let's say I have a or like maybe to make it a little bit more of an accurate analogy, like maybe I have a method of completing this equation, but it's a really, really long method, and it takes me like 10 minutes to finish this problem. So how can I condense it down now maybe to like 4 minutes or to 5 minutes? And we can only do that through discussion with partners, or like, again, having a self-reflection process. Because as much as I can have perspective, it's always very eye-opening to talk to other high-level competitors who maybe they have very polarizing views from what I think, but still I can still put myself into someone else's shoes. I'm like, oh, okay, like I can see why you think like that and why that works for you. And it can only help us, again, build, especially in this time where we're all kind of cooped up at home. I think really being able to visualize, and honestly, to what it's worth, I think because we've been talking so much about watching competition videos and stuff too, I really do believe if you're looking at the video with focus and intent to learn, that even if you're not training, but you're just looking at the moves over and over, you're starting to form memories of this position. And when you go back to train, you're going to remember that body positioning, and you're going to start executing things even though you never drilled it before, because they're really mental reps in a way, you know. Like
Absolutely.
one of my mentors at sorry, go ahead, John.
I was going to say, I think there's a large subconscious development aspect to watching competition video as well, where people always think of it as kind of all cognitively aware, where you're like, okay, oh, his hand is here. Now next time I roll, I'm going to put my hand there. And of course, there's like an aspect of it where you're analyzing and like taking notes and testing things, and you learn that you can explain. But there's also like a subconscious part where you'll just know, like not even like notice, or like you won't be able to articulate it, but you'll notice patterns of how the person kind of positions their hips, or like small subtleties in where their shoulder are. And you'll naturally start adding that in as you roll, because it's like your brain can kind of like mirror things it sees without even knowing. And I've noticed that a lot, where if I'm studying a certain competitor enough, I'll notice sometimes you'll even pick up some of their mannerisms or like tics. Like if they like scratch their head a lot or something, if you're watching it all the time, you'll actually do that a little bit. It's really weird.
Absolutely, yeah. You know, absolutely. I mean, I was at Atos and AOJ before, right? And a lot of my mannerisms do come from the Mendes brothers, you know, like even the way that they stand and they approach their opponent, the facial expressions, you know, it's kind of all rubs off at a certain point if you are watching the tape enough. And just to go back to what I was about to elaborate on, I think I was really lucky at white belt when I was training at Atos Hong Kong. One of my main training partners was a purple belt there, and I really feel like at that point of time, I feel he was really ahead of the curve in certain things, even in terms of like video analysis. Like I remember like none of my other training partners or nobody else at the gym was really looking at subscriptionals so much at that time, and he already had a judo background. I had been like collecting years and years of judo instructionals, and every time he would watch a jiu-jitsu video, he would literally be looking at a 10-second segment or less sometimes, and he would watch it in slow motion and then play it again and then rewind and then play it again and speed it up, and he would just keep researching the smallest details, and that had already started to kind of condition my ability to analyze videos, because I was already looking for certain things that other people weren't at that time, already at a very newbie level in my jiu-jitsu development, you know. So I remember the first time I logged in to MG in action, I was like bewildered that they had a mirroring function. I was like, oh my God, like this is just like a next level way to analyze all these body movements. But yeah, I think people shouldn't underestimate the power of mental reps, you know, that our brains are so powerful, and cognitively we can do a lot with it. It's just more, you know, going back to ego and insecurity, you know, like I can say even for myself, if I have to be completely honest with you, because I was anticipating to do the Pan Americans like this last week, you know, I'm in a very competitive state of mind right now, whereas in contrast to last year, I would say I was much more in a artist teacher space. Like I didn't feel as competitive last year. I do have a little bit of insecurity at times that, I'm not training as much, like will my ability degrade? But, you know, it's more like going back to that rational thought process. I totally know that won't happen, you know, but it doesn't stop the process of those thoughts still coming in. And I think that's what's happening for a lot of people, whether like the recreational or competitors. There's always that feel like, I'm not using this time to train, and my like other people who are in quarantine or they have more training partners, they're getting their training in. It always stems back to the same thing, this ego conversation on the insecurity of, am I putting in enough time? Am I working hard enough, rather than am I working in a smart way that I can still obtain results, you know? I think it's good for us to perhaps highlight to other people that, you know, having these conversations can also reassure you in a time like this with the coronavirus. I think we have to show as a collective this method really works. It's not just a half-assed solution. There's a lot of science to whether maybe more people would like to see more journals on it or studies. Like, I think this is the main way that we're going to get better right now. When people start adapting, be a part of the evolution, or they will fall behind.
Yeah, especially in times like this. It's like you don't really have a choice. Most people don't. Yeah, so I probably need to get heading out here. But the conversation was awesome. We definitely need to do another one soon. I feel like we have a lot of like other topics that we could go deep on here. Like I feel like going down into strength training, mobility work, the creative process, all of that have been really good too.